What's up, everybody? This is Danielton, and it's time for another retrospect on the king of survival horror. To be honest, it's kind of getting tough to predict which game will be announced first since no new information has sprung out from Capcom. Aside from a slight tease in the Capcom presentation where one of the creators said there is a Resident Evil game in the works, we got nothing else to go off of. For this video, however, we'll be focusing on the very first Resident Evil, or at least the remake of it, and see what aspects of this game will Capcom keep, improve, or just flat out remove. Before I continue, I want to address that these are just my opinions and nothing in this video should be taken seriously. I am also open to other people's opinions, so if you have any ideas of what you would like to see in the Re-Remake, please let me know. Just remember to be nice. Now, without further ado,
Resident Evil.
oh, and I should also mention, there's spoilers. As before, we'll start with the game's introduction. Here we are introduced to the main characters, Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield, as they, as well as the other members of STARS, are chased down by zombie dogs and stumbled onto the mansion where this game takes place. For this one, I thought it would be pretty neat if you could play through the introduction. Have it be where you explore the woods and search for certain clues. Have it where you actually run from the zombie dogs. I feel like that would be a fun way to introduce you to the gameplay and characters. Speaking of characters, I would like to see more development in the characters. The main cast like Jill, Chris, Barry, Wesker, Rebecca are fine, but I want to see more scenes with other STARS members like Richard and Enrico. Giving them more screen time or even bigger roles can add a lot more charm to the remake. And to me, it could also make their death or sacrifice feel more impactful rather than having it feel like a plot convenience. One thing that would be pretty cool to see in this iteration of Resident Evil 1 is for the perspectives of Jill and Chris to be different from each other. You see where I'm going with this, right? For example, have it where Chris and Jill split up in the beginning, explore different locations throughout the game, and have them fight different bosses. Why not have Chris and Chris only fight the giant shark and Jill could deal with Plant 42? Or even have Chris deal with the tyrant while Jill fights off a returned and mutated version of Lisa Trevor. I could go on, but what do you guys think of this? Should the perspectives of the characters be entirely different or the same? This next one might go without saying, but I am sure that the remake will be in third person to go along with the other remakes. However, I would like them to keep the fixed camera angles in this game as an optional style. We've seen Resident Evil experiment with both first person and third person, and they both work great for different reasons. But I would love to see them experiment the remake style with the fixed camera angles that this franchise has started with. This also goes without saying, but I'm confident that they will expand the mansion. I would like to see new rooms as well as new puzzles to go along with the old ones. I could also see them implement wooden boards from RE2 so you can board up windows. One thing I would like to see them implement is certain treasures that will award you with upgrades for your guns or health. I feel like that would be so cool. Another thing I would like to see them implement in the remake is the concept of broken doors. In the original, there would be some doors that you would break and you can no longer go through. Some find it pretty annoying, but I like it because it adds strategy and makes you think whether you want to take that risk of breaking the door or just take the longer route. To make this work, I would also like them to implement an item that can help you fix the broken doors, like a screwdriver. I just like this idea because it makes you think ahead and plan out how you want to traverse the mansion. Another thing I could see them implement from the previous remakes is crafting. It's another concept that could enhance the survival horror. Since resources in this game are basically finite, this would make the game a lot more hard and strategic. If Capcom does decide to add crafting to this game, I would hope that they would balance out the amount of items that you can find so that the player won't have too many or too few items at their disposal. The Resident Evil remake had a certain enemy that gave the players a sense of terror and panic whenever they showed up, and those would be known as the Crimson Heads. I would hate every time I killed a zombie because sometimes I didn't have any fuel to burn them. So then I would have to walk by their corpses, and whenever I didn't want them to, it would get right back up and screw me over. These guys suck to deal with. But that's what makes them so great. They catch you off guard and they make you have to think differently about how you approach them. I don't think I need to talk about their designs because they're perfect as it is. A mutated, faster, and more dangerous zombie is exactly what it should be. This is the one thing I hope they don't remove because these enemies are absolutely terrifying to encounter. Speaking of terrifying encounters, let's talk about the zombie dogs. Yeah, I really don't have to explain much here. They're zombie dogs. They're essential Resident Evil enemies. But one thing I think could be neat is if there were multiple variations of these good boys. In the first 3 Resident Evils plus the remakes, it's always been a Doberman. And I understand why Umbrella uses a Doberman, but what if they also made zombie German Shepherds or Rottweilers? Hell, putting in mountain wolves would be awesome since it wouldn't be too far off for the Arklay Mountains. I'm not saying I hate the Dobermans, by the way, those guys are badass, but it would be interesting to see them do unique variations of the zombie dogs. For this next one, I would love to see them add more of the yawn. I was amazed and terrified when I first stumbled upon this big reptilian bastard. Unfortunately, you only get to see him twice in the game. In the attic, in the library, and that's it. I would love to see this big snake in more of the game. Personally, I think it'd be cool if he became sort of a Mr. X type deal. I mean that it will appear in certain areas and follow you through certain parts of the mansion. Like imagine if you're just chilling in the entrance hall, and then out of nowhere the yawn pops out. I mean, I think it's a pretty neat idea, but what do you guys think of this? Once you've collected all the masks and placed them in the crypt, you've essentially completed the first part of the mansion, but now you're locked inside the crypt, and in order to leave, you have to fight Crimson Head Prototype 1. For this one, I want him to be like an actual boss. Make him like a tank, give him more health, as well as some unique moves that no other Crimson Head can do. Make the area you fight him in more big, and you basically got yourself a boss there. To me, this would be a great boss to end the first section of the game. Now that we've made it outside, let's talk about a certain enemy that has the possibility of being cut, and that is the crows. Personally, I wouldn't mind them removing the crows as enemies. However, I would like to see the developers do something creative with these guys. For example, they would be perfect as jump scare cues for whenever you walk by a murder of crows. I hope they do something similar to this because it would add a lot to the creepy atmosphere. Our next location is the Residence, which is in my opinion a very underrated part of the game. It's like a mini decrepit version of the mansion, but it does have plenty of memorable moments for me. So for the Re-Remake, I would like to see them expand the Residence, give it more rooms to explore, maybe even a second floor. Just add more to explore for God's sake. One thing about the Residence that makes it so great is we get introduced to these abominations of God. The giant spiders are another staple of the old games that unfortunately went away. As a person who hates spiders, these guys are the worst. But I do have a soft spot for them, and that is why I hope these guys stay in the Re-Remake. If anything, I would expect the developers to make these guys even more disturbing with enhanced graphics and having them jump at you. Ugh, I don't even want to think about it. Let's just move on. We also see bees play a particular role in this part of the game. Just like the crows, I think these guys will also get the boot, unless Capcom does something creative with them. Personally, I think it'd be cool if they attacked you in a swarm, just like in Resident Evil 7. That way, it would be more realistic and actually threatening. Just place a bunch of wasp nests throughout the entire residence, and have it where you can only get past them if you unlock the insecticide spray. I think that would be pretty cool. We've now made it to the second part of the residence, the Aqua Ring, which also doesn't last very long. I would like to see them expand the Aqua Ring section by adding multiple levels to it. Have it where your objective is to drain the water, but you have to go through multiple rooms and multiple floors to drain all of it. And throughout this time, you'll have to deal with what we'll talk about next on our list. The Neptunes, aka sharks, play a pretty big role in this area. And only this area. It kinda sucks that these guys don't get as much attention as all the other enemies in this game, but at the same time, where else would you fight these guys without them feeling out of place? The Aqua Ring is the only place where they actually fit and make sense, which is why I want them to expand the section. As for the design, I would want them to be more infected-like, have it look a little bit more mutated than just a shark. Personally, I thought it would be pretty cool if they had like multiple eyes and messed up teeth, just to show that they were like failed experiments. I don't know, but what do you guys think? Another thing I would like to see expanded is the Aqua Ring puzzle. In the original remake, it was actually pretty cool to have to drain the water whilst this giant shark is trying to screw up your day. But for the Re-Remake, I thought it would be awesome to have it be more complex, with having you have to turn on certain switches, push buttons in a particular order, or solving a hard puzzle to activate the shutters. I really like this because it can build a lot of pressure if you do screw up. I mentioned it before, but I would like to see them make the giant shark be like an actual boss fight. In the original, it kinda seemed like it was going to be a boss, but then he just died. I can already imagine what the boss would be like. A giant arena with enough water for the shark to swim around. I could also imagine defeating it with electricity and a lot of bullets. I just hope the Re-Remake redeems this big guy, because he does have plenty of potential, man. This next one I can also see having some major changes. Plant 42 is a large plant that has been infused with a T-virus, and it's basically the main enemy of the residence, as its roots can even attack you throughout the halls. I love the concept of this giant plant monster. It's another reason I want them to expand the residence, and because of how RE2 Remake made their plant creatures terrifying, I can imagine how Plant 42 would look like. Personally, I think it would be sick if the plant had a bunch of dead husks attached to its roots, bodies that were drained of their life force. That would definitely make it more intimidating. As for his weakness, although it'd be cool to add the J-Volt serum, I don't know how it can be implemented without instantly killing the plant. I guess I'll just leave that to you guys. How do you think they should implement the J-Volt? Because, to me, I have no clue. As we return to the mansion, we are introduced to another iconic enemy of the franchise. The hunters are fast, deadly, and badass. I like how they're the next level Crimson Heads, as they essentially replace the zombies for the second half of the mansion. There isn't much I would like to change about these guys, however, I would like them to look more reptilian when it comes to the face. Personally, I don't like the face of these guys. The weird eyes and mouth just don't fit the body in my opinion. I think that the Hunter Beta from RE3 Remake fits the characteristics of a hunter better, so that's why I think Capcom should take inspiration from these guys rather than these guys. After the mansion, we arrive at the underground area. Like the other areas we've talked about, I would love to see them expand this area with long, narrow passages and extra rooms. The only problem I have with this section is that there are plenty of memorable locations, but the underground itself is pretty boring looking. I would have preferred, instead of the cave coding, it could have been either a sewer or an abandoned construction zone theme. But that's just my opinion. Another thing I'd like to see change is the flamethrower. In the original remake, you would only have the flamethrower for a small portion of the cave section, and you couldn't refill it after it's empty. So for this one, I would like it if you could keep the flamethrower for the rest of the game, as well as having it be reloadable. It would be really handy to have with you at all times, especially for what's coming up next. I swear, if they bring this guy back, I'm gonna have nightmares for weeks. As for its design, I wouldn't change much since, it's a spider, but I would like it to look more distinct from the other giant spiders. One thing I would like to see is for it to have a giant egg sac, and whenever you shoot its egg sac, a bunch of baby spiders pop up and attack you. I think that would be pretty neat. Once you completed the underground section and return to the mansion, you get to this door. Now, you've come face to face with this monstrosity. I haven't talked about her yet, but that's simply because I've been saving her for this moment. Lisa Trevor is one of the most tragic characters in the entire franchise. She was used as a human test subject by Umbrella, and look at what they've done to her. I would normally say that I would want to see her in more of the game, but for this one, I would just want to see her more in this boss fight alone. This fight to me was pretty weak because you can easily go past Lisa and push all the statues off while your partner distracts her. I think this would have been better if the area were bigger and the statues took a lot longer to push off. I also wouldn't mind if Lisa had some new moves herself, just something to make this boss feel more like a boss. Now we've reached the final destination of the game. I mean, of course, it wouldn't be a Resident Evil game without a secret underground laboratory. This part, to me, feels like the most perfect when it comes to atmosphere and lengthwise. You actually spend a good amount of time in the lab. The only change I could see is adding more puzzles. I really liked how, in order to unlock a door, you had to find a puzzle in a bunch of x-rays. I also like how, in order to get the best ending, you would have to use certain items you found from the beginning, because without the yellow gem, you couldn't get the CD, and without the CD, you can't save Jill or Chris. Hopefully the developers will consider these puzzles as inspiration and make plenty more cooler ideas. One part of the lab I would like to see improvements on are the chimeras, who are essentially the special enemy of the lab section. Personally, I really love the design of these little gremlins. They're like if you took Brundlefly from The Fly and made mini versions of him. It looks so sick. I also like the disturbing lore behind these guys. Apparently, it was one of the first experiments using the T-virus with genes of other animals. The chimeras were made from combining fly genes with a human egg cell. And so, the unfortunate test subjects were forced to give birth to these abominations. That is some traumatizing shit when you really think about it. Now, if I were to make some changes to their design, I'd go back to my redesign of RE5's Reapers. Just add a bit of human features to give it that uncanny look. I think that would be a perfect fit for these guys. Next up, I'd like to talk about how you restore the power with the fuel capsule. This is a really interesting concept. To power up the elevator, you need the fuel from the capsule, but if you move too much or even run, the fuel will spontaneously explode and it's instant game over. I feel like this idea can be greatly improved on, especially with the new RE engine, and if they were to extend the endpoint and add some enemies along the way, it'll feel very intense to play, man. Now we've reached the finale. The Tyrant is one of the most iconic monsters in the entire Resident Evil franchise. As Wesker said,
"It's magnificent."
There's just something so amazing about this monster. It's the perfect balance of intimidating and breathtaking. I have no problems with anything in this boss. However, I would like to see a slight redesign when you reach the final battle. I imagine he'd be more mutated, a little bit taller, and have his rib bones exposed to show his weak spot. But that's a little nitpicky. I like the design how it is now, and I hope Capcom gives the Tyrant the polish it deserves. Before we wrap this up, there are still a couple of things that I like to bring up that I hope to see in the Re-Remake. One of these things is the multiple endings. Aside from RE7 and Revelations 2, there aren't that many RE games with multiple endings. And although we already know the true ending, I really hope that they don't remove them from this game. I just like the option of getting the good ending, the bad ending, or the really bad ending. Next up, let's talk about the secret enemy that only appears once you beat the game with both Jill and Chris. You couldn't imagine how many times I died to this guy because I accidentally shot him thinking he was a normal zombie, and then he's like this bad omen that always seems to find you at every turn, and you can't fight back, so all you can do is run. Even still, I absolutely love this guy, and I hope he stays in the game. He can be like an Easter egg and just pop out of nowhere whenever nothing is happening. I feel like it'd be a really funny troll to anyone who goes AFK. After beating the game, you unlock some extra modes to play. These aren't side modes, they're more like extra challenges thrown into the main game. Like Invisible Mode, where every enemy is invisible, and Real Survival, where all item boxes are separate and don't share the same inventory. Those are all fine and dandy, and I hope they stay in the Re-Remake, but I would like to see if they added a few more. For example, I would like to see them add a countdown mode, where you would have to beat the game within a time limit. Just add more challenge modes like that. It would add a whole lot more to the side content of the game. Speaking of side content, that's the one thing that this game is lacking. If they were to come up with extra content, I would like to see what happened behind the scenes of the main story, kinda like Ghost Survivors. I want to play the perspectives of the other STARS members that didn't make it out, like Richard, Enrico, Forrest. Again, these are all just predictions, but I hope that Capcom considers these ideas or uses them as inspiration. We'll just have to wait and see what they do. Lastly, I was looking up some of the game's cut content to see which one should be brought back. Unfortunately, I just didn't find any that really stood out. However, I did find this one pretty interesting. The Sea Snake was a rejected enemy that was originally going to be in the PlayStation 1 version of Resident Evil. From its design being very similar to the Luzija from RE6 and the Gulpworm from Code Veronica, I would assume you would encounter it somewhere in the Aqua Ring section? Maybe it was supposed to be the boss before being replaced by the Neptune. For whatever reason they had, I really hope that they revisit this concept because by the looks of this one drawing, it would have been a really cool boss. And that's the end of my wish list for the Resident Evil 1 Re-Remake. While I'm not sure which game will get the remake treatment first, I'm still looking forward to what Capcom has in mind for the franchise in the future. So this won't be the last wishlist video I make on Resident Evil. I have plenty more to talk about. In fact, I'll actually leave it up to you guys to choose. Which Resident Evil should I talk about next? Leave them as well as your ideas in the comments below, and I'll be sure to check them out. Anyway, if you like this video, please give it a huge thumbs up. And if you want, why not subscribe as well? I would really appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and remember, don't be a Jill sandwich. Peace out! One day, my friend. One day.